a piece of good news this week, I think. So the Texas primaries happen this week, and a really big kind of an upset, I think you would say. Maybe not to people who, are on Instagram a lot because this guy ran a lot of good ads, but it's always an upset, I think, when the incumbent loses a primary. And so Representative now, state rep. So he who got famous, by the way, when the Texas reps fled with the gerrymander. This is probably the beginning of his, stardom in the political sphere. James Talarico defeated two-term Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett in a U.S. Senate primary. Talarico is a Presbyterian seminarian and a former teacher. Basically, he got right. On the Republican side, there's a runoff between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. Interestingly, this is the most expensive Senate primary on record, over $122 million in ad spending. That should be illegal. You know what I mean? That's disgusting for a primary. Remember, the Titanic budget was $100 million. When I just remember that, people, that this is disgusting. Also, there's the Dan Crenshaw, famous eye patch boy. He lost his primary, which led Tony Gonzalez, who we will be talking about very soon. He ended up dropping out. This guy's, whoa. We will get to that. Stick around for that. But I wanted to talk about Talarico because, and I'm going to be just for full transparency, I've donated to his campaign. So I like him. I am biased. I wanted him to win. I gave him money. So there we go. I love this guy. I think he's better Beto O'Rourke. You know what I mean? Kind of what the Beto type was trying to do, but better. And the reason why he's better, and it's kind of what I talked about in the Lonely Liberal blog post, but what we talked about last week, he didn't take money from PACs. He did it. He did it the right way. He went economic populism, but he does it in a priesty type presentation. I think it's a real problem for Republicans in Texas. I think this guy is a real problem, and I think he could win this whole thing. I actually think this is probably the best shot we've ever seen in our lives, legitimately, of a Democrat winning the senator seat. I'm stoked about this. I love him. So what do you think?
Yeah, it would be an amazing win if he could pull it off, because Texas is just the heart of the Republican base. It really is. To win a statewide election as a Democrat would be massive. I know, the past few elections, they've been coming closer, right? The past couple Ted Cruz elections.
They've always been sniffing,
Right, and it's always are Democrats really gaining ground, or does Ted Cruz just suck as a candidate? This is for the other Senate seat, not Cruz's seat. But it's tough to separate. Just, is Ted Cruz just so hateable that he can barely win in Texas?
How many more times can he flee the state in a weather emergency to people not care?
Yeah, but I was going to bring up your Substack post from this week too, because it talks about Trump's economic populism and Bernie's, and how they're, even though they're so different, they're telling people they're getting screwed, which is an accurate statement. And we are getting screwed. We feel like we're getting screwed, and we want, at the bare minimum, our politicians to believe that, kind of.
Exactly.
And specific ideology or policy proposals don't matter that much in elections like they used to. Now it really is about that populism, and Talarico's great at in a very different way from Bernie or Trump. He speaks the language of the people he's trying to get. He doesn't talk he speaks like a pastor.
Yeah, he sounds like a pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the same way that Trump talks like your average New York sleazebag, and Bernie talks like your average working class Brooklyn Jew. They talk like the people that they do really well with. And Talarico just sounds like a very grounded, very Christian, but not religiously right person, which is really interesting, and just feels so overdue. Why don't the Democrats have more candidates like him that are trying to reclaim Christianity from the Republicans, who use it only to take away people's rights? And even though so much of Christianity focuses on helping the poor, they completely ignore
They
that
hate that part.
the central part of the Jesus story. They just
Literally
forget about.
that got completely glossed over. It's
So I think
unbelievable.
it's interesting. Like, we shouldn't be overly optimistic about his general election chances, but like, it would be amazing, even if he makes it like a razor thin race. Like, it would be a huge win, I think.
And it's helpful that there's clearly not coordination in the Republican side, on the Republican. You know what I mean? Trump hasn't endorsed anyone. They're not really sure. They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, it's clearly disorganized on the right side. So that helps, I think, like the general election odds. I also think that this is the type of guy that I could see becoming president eventually. Like, he reminds me a lot of Pete Buttigieg in the way that he is very clear with the way he communicates, very level, doesn't seem to get emotional, just very like grounded guy who really appeals to a lot of people. But the thing that he has that Buttigieg, like Buttigieg is just tied to the Biden administration, which has so much bad aura around it for whatever reason, whether you think it's good or bad, it's just true. And also, he doesn't have the, more Secretary of Transportation's an important role, but it's not like he's been governor or senator or something like that. He was mayor of South Bend. I love Pete Buttigieg, but nevertheless, I think that could hurt him in trying to convince people. Whereas if this guy gets to become senator, you know what I mean? Like that, he could Obama, I think, like in the sense of like, it could be a few years and then he's going again, And I think, again, one thing that we should harp on before we move on is another piece of evidence that you don't need to take money from PACs to win elections. It's harder. You have to be better at your job, but we are continually now seeing more and more evidence that this myth that the only way to be competitive is by taking all this big money, it's just not true. It's just not true. Like, it's getting proved. And I think that the excuses that Democrats are making by still taking money is getting less and less real. Every time one of these guys wins. Even if he doesn't end up winning the Senate House, it doesn't matter to me. Like, the point has been made. He beat the incumbent,
Right. And also, like, people are seeing through, I think, like, politicians' claims about the other side much more. Whereas, like part of the problem with, I think, Hillary and Biden's campaigns was that the biggest negative was kind of true. Like, even though there were so many exaggerated claims from the Republicans, like the idea that Hillary is a lifelong politician who gives very standard politician answers and doesn't seem genuine, like, that's true. The idea that Joe Biden was too old to run for re-election, that was true.
Definitely.
But then, like, the idea that Mamdani is a radical communist who's going to instill Sharia law, like, obviously not true from anybody that listens to a 30-second clip of him. And that's the thing with, like, Talarico, like, the idea that he's this communist, like, any normal Republican-leaning Texan is not going to think that when they see him talk or see his ads. Like, so, like, the biggest hit you can make against him, like, is just obviously not true. And, like, I think that's, like, a good thing for the Democratic candidates.
No, and in fact, I think it's more likely that Democrats attack him. Like, I think that's the most likely outcome, is that there's going to be something that his religious beliefs push him up against, where he's going to give, like, a non-answer to a transgender question or a gay marriage question. Not gay marriage, because he's already had to do that, but like kind of the way they hit Zoran, like the Republicans hit Zoran about something like about like Israel and stuff like that. They're going to hit him with whatever that one that they know hits against his like personal beliefs more than like his policies, one way or another. And it's going to be infighting. I think that's more likely to happen, which I think will be really stupid, because it doesn't matter like that if it's perfect or not, in my opinion. Like, I don't think it matters. I think it's way easier to convince someone who agrees with me 80% to go the next 20 than someone who hates me. Like, it's just not a likely outcome. So yeah, I actually think that's more likely that because eventually he'll have to answer a question like that. You know what I mean? And he's going to have to pick what to do with the way, and he'll probably come up with some good thing about how Jesus says to love all people and turn the other cheek and something like that. That will probably work, but it won't satisfy the further left people. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I don't care what they think
Right.
in this particular case, at least.
Yeah, he's
Uh,
gotta do what he can to win Texas.
he's just got to win. It doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
I don't care.